Alright, so here's a picture of what we're going to be modeling today. Alright, we got our Spitfire right here. And I think it's probably a good idea, whatever you're making, it's probably a good idea to just take a couple of minutes and just observe the model that you're making before you start making it. The reason we got to do this is because, well, it's a bit of a weird shape, right? We have to get a grasp of how exactly we're going to make this shape, right? This one is more of an organic kind of shape, right? And even though, well, it is obviously a hard surface, but it fits more into the organic style of modeling, right? Just because of all the curves and stuff like that. I talked a bit about this in my book, right? But so we're going to have to apply some slightly different strategies today, you know? So I just want to get a grasp of what this shape is like, because I would like to separate this model into several different parts, right? We have the main body of this airplane, which is going to be this kind of tube kind of shape over here. And then we have the wings. But the wings are attached to the body with this very different shape over here. It's kind of a weird kind of panel connecting it. At first, it seems like it's a very tricky shape to make. But I'm going to show you how we can do that later today, alright? Because I think it's actually a pretty useful technique. Because when you're making anything else like this, whether you're making a ship or another airplane or a helicopter or something, this technique that we're going to use for this is probably going to come in pretty handy. So stay tuned for that. And we're also going to have some more hard surface modeling with this type of stuff over here, like the cockpit and some of the stuff in the front here. So this is going to be a slightly different thing. This is unlike what I usually do on my channel. So stick around and hopefully you're going to learn something from this tutorial, okay? Because it's my first time making an airplane, so I'm also going to learn plenty. So you're also going to see my mistakes and all that stuff. Alright, so let's just jump straight into it, okay? We've looked at our reference, we have a good grasp of what this is like. And now we still need to find some references that we're going to use inside Blender, right? Because we need something to give us an idea of the length of the object, the height of the object, the width of the object. That's what a blueprint is going to be for, right? So we get the measurements correctly. And I have a couple of videos for how to set up references correctly, but we're going to go through it again today because I want to make this tutorial pretty simple and basic for beginners, for everybody to be able to follow, right? So in this case, we're making a Spitfire, which is the Royal Air Force airplane from the Second World War, also before and after. I don't know the trivial details. You guys like to talk about this in the comments and on the live stream, so let me know if anybody has any interesting facts about this thing, right? But we're going to type in Spitfire blueprint, okay? You can already see that I looked for it yesterday when I was warming up for this. And when we type in Spitfire blueprint, you want to go to Google Images or whatever browser you're using. Just go to the images, and you want to look for a picture which has multiple different perspectives. Excuse me. You want to have a top view, you want to have a side view, you want to have a front view. In this case, we don't have a back view, but we don't really need it, right? If you're making a tank, you're gonna want front view and back view as well. But in this case, just front view is gonna be fine, right? So when we type in blueprint, pretty much all the pictures have those three angles that we need. But the problem is, there's two problems, right? One of them is a lot of the pictures are low in resolution, right? So that's not gonna give us a very clear image of what we have to make. It's kind of hard to see where the lines are, right? And the other problem is a lot of the images are very messy, like this one over here. It's a good image, right? It gives a good idea of what the airplane is shaped like, but it's kind of hard to see where some of the details are, right? Let's say if we open this image, it's kind of hard to tell what the shape of the wing is over here, right, from this image. But I'm guessing it's this thing over here, so I think it shouldn't be a problem because it's kind of the wing is kind of angled upwards, as you can see over here. So I think that this shape is pretty good for giving us this gives us a good image of what this airplane is shaped like, you know. So I think that this image is going to be quite all right. But there are some other images which are a little bit more grainy. They're a little bit harder to see what's going on, right? So in this case, we're pretty lucky because we found one pretty quickly. But sometimes you're going to have a hard time with this. You're going to have to look for a couple of minutes, right? So we're going to go ahead and download this image. Right? We're just going to save this to our computer. Now, you don't have to do this, but I like to do this because it makes things a little bit easier. I like to open up PaintNet, okay? Or you can use any photo editing program that you have available to you. Probably Microsoft Paint is not going to cut it, but you get the idea, right? What I want to do now is I want to load up my image, and I just want to invert the colors, right? So in PaintNet, I can just go up here to Adjustments, and I can go to Invert Colors, right? It's going to make the background black and the blueprint white. It makes it a little bit darker, so it's a little bit easier to look at inside Blender, right? It's not going to hurt your eyes after a while, which would happen if the image was very bright. So we're just going to save this, overwrite that old picture. Now we can just go to Blender. Let's go to Top View, right? Numpad 7. I get a little bit of lag when I'm recording on my laptop. I'm abroad at the moment, so I don't have my usual gear with me. You can see I have my shitty mic with it's taped onto this little piece of metal, right? Just because I don't have a microphone stand. But we're going to have a little bit of lag today, so bear with me. Hopefully it's not going to be too much of a problem. Anyway, we're in Top View now. And we're going to go to Shift A, we're going to add, and we're going to add an image, and we're going to add a reference. Okay, so now we just have to find that image that we saved, okay, Spitfire, and it just gets loaded up in the Blender as the reference. So we can just use this for our measurements and whatnot, right? So right now we have this, it's perfectly flat. Okay, if we go to top view, we can have this nice top view of the airplane. It's kind of in the way, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here to object data properties on the right side. Okay, I don't know if you can see this because of my webcam. But we're going to check opacity here. And we're going to slide that down a little bit, somewhere like maybe halfway, or depends on whatever you're comfortable with. But just to give us some transparency so it doesn't get in the way too much. And we're also going to move it down. Okay, we're going to move it down so we can model so it doesn't get in our way like that either, right? And I'm going to place the airplane just so I can make sure all the references are easier to align together. I'm going to put it in the middle on the y-axis, right? I have to slide it on the x-axis so the middle is exactly on the y-axis, right? And the tip of the airplane is going to be exactly on the x-axis, right? So that'll give us a nice top view perspective of the airplane. Now, I have my 3D cursor over here in the middle, right? You can just do Shift S and cursor to world origin. That's going to put your 3D cursor right in the middle. And if I go over here to the pivot point, I can set it to 3D cursor. And now when I rotate this image, it's just going to rotate around the 3D cursor, right? So it's going to keep the same distance from the 3D cursor. And this is very useful because now we can just duplicate this. We can right click, and then we can rotate around the y-axis by 90 or maybe minus 90 degrees, right? And it's just going to snap to the other angle, right? So now if we go to our side view, we can also just rotate this one more time, right? Maybe by 180 degrees, right? Depending on how we want to align this. In this case, the lower blueprint is pointing that way, right? In that direction, so we want to make sure this one is the same, right? Now we set the other airplane so it's exactly in the middle, right? So it's exactly in the tip is exactly in the middle of the world. So we're just gonna adjust that a little bit as well, right? Like that, just so they balance out. I'm hoping that the proportions are the same. We're gonna push that to the background, right? And we're also gonna do another one. We're gonna duplicate it, rotate by another 90 degrees, and also set up the front view. We're gonna have to rotate about 180 degrees again. Set up the front view, and this is gonna be probably the same story, right? So let's say the tip of the airplane is gonna be just like this, okay? So now that we have our references set up, now we can actually start doing a little bit of modeling, right? So if we look at our picture over here, I'm not going to use my default cube to make this, obviously. I'm actually going to use an octagon or just any type of circle, but I think an octagon is the best fit because it gives us the right amount of vertices that we need to produce the topology that we need to make this airplane. Because you can see that everything here is kind of starting from a circle. Everything is coming out of this circular part in the front, which holds the propeller. And then it kind of expands out into the rest of the airplane, okay? So I'm going to use an octagon. It's also going to give me some nice topology to work with in the back here. And you'll see why, it makes sense. But I'm going to start with an octagon, and if you're following along and you're trying to do something similar, I recommend that you do the same, okay? So we're going to go to side view. And we're going to go ahead and add a circle, okay? Now, once you add a circle, you get this little menu down here where you can just change the number of vertices. And I'm going to set that to 8. Now, by default, your octagon, or when you create an octagon, it's going to be oriented a certain way. We want the faces to be on the sides, on the axes. We don't want the vertices to be here, right? So we want it to be a little bit more like this, okay? So to do that, we have to rotate it by a certain angle. Now, that angle that we have to rotate it by is exactly half of the angle between these two vertices. Now, the angle between these two vertices, or these 2 points at the circle, is 45 degrees. So what's half of 45 degrees? It's going to be 22.5. And that will apply to any other circle if you want to flip it from being vertices at the corner to being edges at the corner. You just take half of the angle of the individual vertices. In this case, we rotated the z-axis by 22.5. And that perfectly aligns the circle the way that we need it. Okay, of course, we're going to rotate it by 90 degrees as well. So it's pointing this way. This is where the propeller is going to be, right? When we extrude it out later, it's going to be pointing in that direction, kind of. You know, the fans are going to be here. This is where that direction is where the airplane is going to be pointing. But let's not extrude that just yet. What do we do there? And let's scale this down. Let's take it to the right size, okay? And we're going to bring that back here and just try to approximately get the right size of the circle. We're going to fill that in, and we're going to start extruding it very slowly. So first we're going to extrude it just a little bit. And we're going to take some of these vertices over here, and we're just going to pull them down a little bit to get this shape in the front. Then we're just going to do that again a couple more times, right? We should probably take it over here as well. We're going to add a bunch of subdivisions of this later. We're going to add some subdivision surface modifiers. So that's going to drastically reshape this airplane as well. We're also probably going to want to lift some of these vertices up a little bit just to get them aligned correctly. All right. So we're going to unselect some of them and just individually place them as we see fit. And then we're just going to keep selecting this face in the back here. You want to make sure not to scale everything. You don't want to scale everything on all the axes, because that's also going to make it a lot more narrow. We don't want that. We just want to change the height for now. Okay. We're going to go to side view, and we're just going to extrude it one more time. Bring it over here to the cockpit for now. I'm going to maybe lift that up a little bit as well, just to make sure we have the right trajectory, if you will, for the edges here. Maybe we're going to drop this down a little bit more. It doesn't really matter too much. We're going to play around with some of these edges a little bit more afterwards, once you get the basic shape down. Now, when we go back here, you're going to notice that there's a little bump over here. It's kind of like the hull or the body of the airplane suddenly gets a lot higher. This is something that we're going to have to ignore for now, and we're going to deal with that a little bit later. So for now, we're just going to pretend like this is the maximum height, like as if we're keeping the same height from the front here. You're going to see why later. It's kind of hard to explain right now. It'll make sense a little bit later on. And then we're just going to extrude it to the back here. We're just going to keep going. We're going to lift this up a little bit. Then we're going to extrude it one more time and take it all the way to the back here where this rear wing is located. Okay. Now you want to make sure you pay attention to this part, because this flap in the back here, it's a separate object. This little part, or this line here, it separates the airplane body from the flap. So this part is still the same object. If you take a look over here, this is the same mesh as the airplane. This is still perfectly fused together. But then the flap in the back here is a separate object, right? So we have to keep that in mind when we're making this wing in the back here. Now, very conveniently, since we added an octagon, we have a little bit of a narrower shape up here at the top of the body of the airplane, which we can use to extrude out the wing in the back, or the tail, or whatever you call that part. Somebody let me know in the comments if there's a different name for these flaps on the wings or in the back. I don't know what these are called. I'm just going to call it the rear wing. So for now, we have the very, very, very basic shape from side view. Okay, so if we look at it from here, it kind of looks like a little fish or something, or even it kind of looks like a machete or something like that. Now we're going to go to top view, and we're going to try to get the right width and the right shape from top view. So we're going to select some of these parts because we have to make them a little bit wider. You can see that it's quite narrow at the moment. We're going to select all that, and we're going to scale it up on the x-axis. Okay, so these vertices match. Then we're going to deselect those. We're going to scale some of the rest, okay, and we're going to scale the middle part over here, and we're going to deselect that as well. And let's see where we end up with this right now. I think we should keep the same width. See, it's kind of hard to see from this blueprint. This is what I meant earlier when I said that it's a little bit messy. It's kind of hard to see where exactly is the edge of the body of the airplane here, because this line over here kind of just stops for some reason. Then something else is going on over here. There's no clear straight line which defines the body of the airplane. Now, I don't know if that's a faulty blueprint or if that's something else. It might also be that we're looking at a blueprint which is showing us the airplane from below, because I can't see a cockpit, I can't see any windows. It's kind of a weird blueprint. But anyway, we can see approximately how wide the body is, so we're gonna be all right. We don't have to make it exact. As long as it looks kind of like a Spitfire, it's still gonna look pretty cool, right? So let's just make sure that our back is also narrow enough or thin enough. So we're going to scale that down, again, only on the x-axis. We don't want to scale it on the other axes. So this part is narrow enough, and then we're also going to take this part a little bit further like this. Okay, so this should be fine now. And if we go back to our 3D view, we can see that everything is looking pretty good. Okay, it's starting to get kind of closer to the shape that we want. Now, at this point, it might be a good time to start adding some subdivision surface modifiers to this object. So let's go ahead and add a modifier. We're going to add subdivision surface. Let's just go with 1 for now to see how everything is going. We don't have to worry about this n-gon yet. We're going to make a hole here. There's not going to be any n-gons. Don't worry. We'll take care of that later. But what we might want to do is take care of the rear wing. So let's just delete this part over here. This is a very, very ugly shape. See, right now we have an n-gon over here that we don't want. So the best way to do this is to just connect some of these vertices here to turn them into quads. And by the way, I'm doing this by selecting 2 vertices, which are on the same surface, on the same n-gon, and I can just press J to make an edge between them, and that also it leaves the topology correct. You can also make a diagonal one like this or something like that. So that's a pretty useful tool for cleaning up topology sometimes. But now we don't have any weird n-gons back here, so we can just go back to our side view, and we can start extruding this part over here. Now, when we extrude this, we have to be very careful that we don't go too far with this part over here. So we're gonna have to bring this edge loop a little bit closer to the back. So maybe we can just slide it or something like that. So I press double G, and then it just slides along these edges that we already created, like this. We can maybe move this a little bit further to the back, and then we'll extrude this one more time. And as you can see, it starts bringing this other stuff along with it. So you have to be careful, and we have to just kind of try to get the right angle over here that we want. So we're gonna add another edge loop over here to kind of tighten this corner. And I think we're also gonna have to take this a little bit further to the back. Okay, so maybe we'll slide it a little bit more. And let's just try to get the right shape. Approximately, we shouldn't worry about it too much for now. We'll get to this stuff later once we start adding more once we start working with the topology a little bit more, or adding more subdivisions and stuff like that. So we'll just try to kind of roughly get the outline of this. I have a lot of lag over here, so it's not even listening to some of my commands. I don't know why. If anybody knows why my computer is so laggy when I'm recording, because I checked my RAM. My RAM is alright, the CPU usage is fine, everything's alright. I don't know why it's so laggy. It's also not my memory that's full, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, the show must go on. We don't stop for nothing. It doesn't matter if we got lag. Okay, so now look, we kind of have the right angle over here. Don't worry about this part yet. We'll take care of that later, as I said. But we kind of have the right shape that we want here. Maybe we can also tighten it a little bit more with this, another edge loop in the back here. And I think we're also going to want to make sure that everything is the exact same width over here. Because if we take a look at this part over here, it kind of looks like this part in the back here is just as narrow as this part, or just as thin as this part at the top here. So the airplane gets completely, the body of the airplane gets completely thin towards the back. So we want to make sure that this keeps a straight line over here. So we want to push these vertices a little bit more inwards. And a good way to do that is we can make sure that we can place our 3D cursor at the top here, okay, with Shift S. We snap our 3D cursor there. Our 3D cursor is the pivot point, and then we can just select this entire edge loop around that 3D cursor, or all the vertices on that edge loop below the 3D cursor that we want to flatten out. Maybe this one as well. And we want to make sure that this has the same, that this is completely straight. So we're just going to take all this, and we're going to press S, and we're going to scale it on the X-axis. I have to set this 3D cursor. We're going to scale it on the X-axis to 0. Alright, so now it's completely flat on the X-axis, which means it's perfectly straight, which makes it the right shape. And we are going to do the same thing on the other side again. Okay, so we're going to select these vertices over here, and we are going to scale it to 0 with the 3D cursor once we place our 3D cursor over there. So now this kind of gives us the result that we want. So we can move on from the rear wing now. So you can see if you add some more subdivisions, it starts to look a little bit nicer, but it's approximately the shape that we want. All right, now I want to show you something that's going on in the front of this airplane. Okay, let's take a look at this reference image one more time. So we made the whole shape of the body, right? But this is only something that I noticed later, to be honest with you. In the front here, we have this little separate panel below the front, right underneath the propeller, right? I'm guessing this is the engine cover or something. Let me know in the comments if somebody knows what exactly this is for. But this is clearly a separate object, right? So if we apply the subdivision surface modifier and complete this mesh before we add this cut, it's going to be pretty tricky to add this part later, right? Because we have to basically have a cut, a clear separation between the top part and the bottom part, right? So we're going to take care of that right now. And I'm going to show you how to do that, because it's a pretty tricky shape. It took me a little while to come up with the right way to do this. Okay, I had to think about it for a little bit. But here's how we're going to do that, okay? Just put my reference images back into place here. So in the reference image, we can see this line. We can clearly see that this line here is what separates the body of the airplane versus the cover of the engine. I'll just call it that. Correct me if I'm wrong again. Now, let's take a look at another thing that we have to keep in mind for this. The propeller here is circular, which means the front of the airplane has to be circular so that the propeller can be fitted on there, which means it evolves from a circle. And as we go towards the middle of the airplane, it kind of turns into this different type of shape. It's not a circle anymore, but it's kind of some different shape. Anyway, I'll show you how this works, right? The top of the airplane, the body of the airplane, is a part of the circle, but not the entire part. The lower part of this circle is made up by the part that covers the engine, right? Which means that we have to cut this shape somewhere around here. Let's get rid of this face first. And what we're going to do now is we have to tighten this edge first, because this needs to be completely flat. This can't be smooth. You can imagine if we take these vertices or these edges here and we slide them, we need it to be more like this. We need it to be a little bit sharper, and then we can add the engine cover below that, right? So the way that we can do that is we need to first straighten out all these vertices and all these edges here so they're all in a straight line, first of all, okay? And the easiest way to do that is to use your loop tools, right? If you saw my loop tools video, this is the G-stretch tool. But if you don't have your loop tools enabled, I don't know if I already showed you this earlier in this tutorial, but just go to your edit preferences, add-ons, type in loop tools, and just check that box right there, and it'll activate some useful tools for you. So now when we select an edge loop like this, we want these edges here to be in a perfectly straight line. We don't want them to be curved, okay? We want them to be more like this, right? We want them to be perfectly straight. And the most useful, the easiest way to do that is to select these three edges. We go to W, and we find loop tools over here, and we just click on G-stretch, right? And as you can see, it just perfectly aligns all the vertices between the first and the last vertex. And that's pretty much the answer that we need. So we can do that simultaneously for the other two edge loops as well. So we're going to select those, W, loop tools, G-stretch, and we're good to go, right? We're also going to do it up here because we need this part to be flat as well. G-stretch. Now that'll kind of give us the base that we need for making this lower part. So we have some space here that's kind of a flat box, and we can make the engine cover right there now. So the other thing that we're going to do here is we're also going to take these faces at the bottom here, and we're going to scale them up a little bit on the x-axis so that we can tighten the edges a little bit further. Maybe we will also just bring this forward a little bit closer. We'll bring this edge loop from back here a little bit closer, just so we can make it follow this line here that makes up this engine. Okay, let's also lift these up a little bit more. So we need to define the end of the body and the beginning of the engine cover, right? That sounds almost biblical, unintentionally. But so now we need another object that's going to make up this shape over here. And how are we going to do that? I'll show you in a second. We need to select this entire surface down here. Okay, so I'm just using Control and Shift again. The same way that we can select all the vertices on an edge loop between two vertices with Control Shift. So we select this one, Control Shift, we select this one. We can select this face, and we hold down Control Shift while we select this face. And that's going to select the entire surface, entire area, which is defined by these two corners, right? So everything between them is going to be selected as well, which is pretty convenient when selecting stuff like this, right? And now we can just duplicate this. Okay, and let's separate that to new object. Right, like that. So we duplicate it when we have it selected. We press P, separate to new object, separate by selection. Now let's go to our side view. I think maybe we should probably flatten this out as well, or something like that. Anyway, let's take this shape that we have right here. This kind of like a plane or kind of like a surface. It's two-dimensional almost. When I say two-dimensional, it doesn't have any thickness, right? It's infinitely thin. And we're gonna extrude that a little bit, right? So we're going to extrude to give it some thickness like this. Maybe we can just extrude, right click, and press Alt S. But that's going to give us pretty much the same result. Okay, kind of like this. Maybe we can try to kind of get it right this way. And then we're going to move around some of these vertices. So we're going to select the corner vertices over here. And we're just going to slide them around with our G slide tool, right? We're going to slide them up and down a little bit until we see that the mesh that we have here kind of aligns with the outline of the blueprint, with the outline of the engine cover in the blueprint, right? We're just going to slide it back and forth a couple of times until it falls into place, right? Now you can see that we're kind of getting there, right? It's kind of giving us the shape that we need. And we still have a pretty big gap here, so we're definitely going to have to do something about that. I think the best thing for us to do would just be to add another loop cut right there, and a loop cut there. And we're also probably going to have to readjust this shape a little bit further, a little bit better. Maybe what we should do is select this entire set of faces over here. Now it's a little bit more trial and error, right? I don't know how to exactly get the shape right. We just have to play around with it a little bit and see what works best. I'm going to select these edges over here on the sides. I'm also going to bring them closer together just to get this more round kind of shape, right? Maybe I'll even end up lifting this up a little bit more, right? Because we still need this part at the bottom here to be like a kind of a little part of a circle or something, you know what I mean? Maybe we can even delete all these faces on the inside, get rid of not the edges. We want to delete the faces, right? And then see how we can get that to end up looking like this bottom part of the circle, which is going to hold the propeller, right? Maybe if we add a loop cut over here, right? That part kind of checks out almost. We can also maybe fill this face in with something more appropriate, right? So we're going to select this edge loop over here. We're going to go to face. We're going to go to grid fill, all right? Now this looks like a complete mess, so we're going to play around with some settings here, the offset and the span settings, maybe span 3, offset 2. That kind of works, but we need a little bit more than that. We need a little bit more detail. We can also just add a loop cut right here and pull that down a little bit more. See what that will do for us. Okay. And so now this kind of almost looks like a circle. We can definitely get there with a little bit more work. I think we shouldn't have deleted this face. We should have kept it full. So maybe we're just going to try to grid fill that as well. As you can see, when we grid fill that, it fills it up pretty well, and that ends up looking pretty good. We can maybe move it up and down a little bit and make it a little bit wider, a little bit narrower. See what ends up giving us the right shape. And this is the part that just kind of a little bit of organic modeling, right? It just kind of, you just have to try until something works relatively well. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of hard to predict. You just have to kind of sculpt your way through it and see where it's gonna fit best. It kind of looks like a whale now, doesn't it? Like a blue whale, except the tail is a little bit crooked. And see what we can do down here. Maybe take this one down a little bit lower, right? And we're just gonna try to make it so that it fits better with this other shape. Maybe these are definitely gonna have to be closer together. Like this, we're gonna slide them down on the x-axis. Play around with it a little bit, see if it's gonna look a little bit better. We should also apply some smooth shading because that's gonna look a lot nicer, right? You see what I mean? We're definitely getting closer to the shape that we want to have here, right? This is kind of what we have down here. We're definitely getting closer. I can see we also have some kind of an exhaust pipe down here. So I don't know what this looks like from below. I'm gonna try to find out on Google. Spitfire bottom, right? I'm gonna type that into Google Images. And now, look at that. I get a picture of the Spitfire from below. So if I open that image up, I can get a nice view of what's happening down here. It doesn't seem to... This part doesn't really look the same over here. It doesn't seem to have anything down there. So I think the easy way out is just to pretend it's not even there. Okay, we're just going to pretend like this was the reference we were looking at because then we don't have to make it, right? I want to move on to the wings soon enough, right? I'll just leave it at that. I don't even want to deal with this anymore. I'm going to parent that. Keep transform, good to go. All right, now, I think we can apply our subdivision surface modifier. We have our little backup body down here, so we're gonna duplicate this one more time since this is a better backup. So we're gonna quick save it again, Shift D and everything, and just move it down by like 20 units. And now I'm gonna come up here and we're gonna go ahead and apply our subdivision surface modifier. Let's see what that looks like right now. Okay, it seems to look pretty good, right? So the reason that we apply this is because we now need to make kind of like a cut so that we can lift this part up and make this little window back here, right? This thing is pretty tricky to create. This little damn windows gave me a pretty hard time when I was thinking about how I'm gonna do it. Honestly, I don't even know how I'm gonna do the front part of this window. It's a really difficult shape. So we're gonna see what we can do about that. Now look at what I have in mind here. So the window begins approximately around this vertex, right? You can see this is where this little window begins. This one right here, right? This is the little line over here. So we want to separate this part over here. This is where it goes higher and then it goes towards the back. So we're going to select these vertices in side view and wireframe with block select. So we select the entire part on top of the airplane like this. And then we're going to press V. And when we press V, we kind of make a little cut there. So we kind of make a separation between the front and the back part, right? Now the problem is that I've only got the front part selected. I want to have the back part instead, right? So I don't want to have the front part. I'm gonna select these faces in the back here. Right, these are the ones that we cut, and I'm gonna deselect the vertices in the back, right? So I only have these vertices selected here, so I can move them up like this. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna move them up like this so that we can have this kind of sharp jump that makes that little window, right? Except I have to have my 3D cursor over here. Okay, by the way, when you place your 3D cursor somewhere, you can undo a couple of steps, but the undo is not going to work on your 3D cursor, right? So notice how I select this part. I want to keep this selection, right? But if I select here, I can place my 3D cursor there. If I undo, it will return the old selection because it will undo the selection that I made, but the 3D cursor stays in place, right? So that's pretty convenient. You think about how you can use that in many different ways. I'll place my 3D cursor here. And then with my 3D cursor as a pivot point, I can just scale this up as much as I want, right? So look in side view and scale this up and bring it up to the top of the window. See what I mean? We can also do it with some other parts, like this part has the same height. We can just do it there as well. You can see where this is going now. We're gonna place our 3D cursor here, scale this part up a little bit, but a little bit less than the previous part. I'm gonna scale this part up a little bit. Maybe you can figure out a way to do this with proportional editing to make it look a little bit better. But right now I'm just gonna try to do it manually. Although that's probably gonna give me a hard time, and I'm gonna have to use my loop tools to correct that a little bit, right? With some relaxation tools and whatnot. I'm gonna lift this up a little bit more, and I think that's quite all right now. Maybe I can just, now that I have a pretty smooth line along everything, I can just place my 3D cursor back here and just put everything down just a little bit lower. You know, kind of like this. Let's select some of these vertices. Actually, don't think I want to bring these down much further. So it's just the ones in the back here that I have to bring down a little bit. Kind of like that, right? I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to mess anything up. I think we got a pretty good shape going for us. So you see what I mean now? This is quite the shape that we want to have here, right? And then we can do something about this little window. We have to inset something. Here's what we can do about this little window. This is going to be pretty cool. We're going to select all these faces on top here, okay? We're going to inset them. And now this is basically a frame, right? If we have this selection, if we delete those faces, this is going to be the window, right? Now we're going to keep these faces because we're just going to make the window with a transparent material or something. But these faces here represent the little window, right? So now we can just take this little cut in the back here. We can line, actually, I think we inset it a little bit too far down. We should only inset these, right? So it's going to be something like this. And that pretty much forms a little window. All right, I'm going to cut this episode now, because we pretty much finished the body of the airplane. Maybe we'll do some more details in the next one, but now we're gonna move on to the wings, all right? Because let's be honest, that's the most fun part. All this other stuff, we're just waiting to get to the wings, okay? So we're gonna put that in the next episode because this one's already like half an hour. Stick around if you haven't already. Like, subscribe, share, whatever, leave a comment, all that stuff. So I'll see you guys in the next one.